Hello, this video will walk you through the completion of a depreciation schedule using the declining balance method, including a partial year depreciation for the first and last year. So the problem we'll be working through is the problem that I handed out in class. It's got the picture of the cow listed right here. And it's really hard to read all this detail here. So what I've done is I've taken and I've blown up some of the essential information that you can find here, and I've listed it right here. So I'll be referring back to this information as well as the depreciation schedule, which I've already blown up and partially completed here, as you can see. So let's start and go ahead and fill this thing out. The first thing we're going to look at is the date column, and what we do for the date column is we always record this thing called the adjusting journal entry for depreciation on the last day of our fiscal year. And so that's why I've put December 31st of 2010 in here, because if you look back at the problem, we bought the thing right here, July 12th of 2010, so the last day of that fiscal year, we're assuming it also follows the calendar year, is December 31st. So we're going to now focus on what goes in to the beginning of year book value column. Book value simply represents how much it is in our balance sheet for, which represents the undepreciated portion of the asset. So let's go back to the problem here and let's pick out some information, such as how much did I pay for it. That would be pretty critical to find out in regards to the book value. So I paid $1,000 each and I bought 2 cows. So my cost, because there's nothing listed here as far as freight or tax or anything, so we now can assume that the beginning book value is $2,000. That's the undepreciated portion of the asset. Hasn't been depreciated yet, we just bought it. The rate, let me walk you through this. The formula for the rate is 1 divided by the useful life multiplied by 2. Recall that the straight line method just would have been 1 over the useful life, but since it's the declining balance method, we double it. So the only thing we need to find is this thing called the useful life, which is listed right here. Management expects the cows to live for 5 years. So therefore we're going to take 1 over 5, which is 20%, and we're going to double it, and that gives us 40%. That's the amount we're going to put in the depreciation rate column. And I'm going to draw a line just representing that this does not change throughout the rest of the schedule. Let's move on to the depreciation expense. This is really one of the key elements we're trying to take away from this schedule. Formula is simply going to be the beginning year book value times the rate. If you do that, you get $800. But look at this. It says annual. We didn't own this thing for a whole year. If you look at the problem, it says, hey, we bought it on July 12th. So not only like halfway through the year, but halfway through a month. So how do we handle that? What we do is we take and we round it to the nearest whole month. And I'm going to use normal rounding rules, which would say that if it's halfway through the month or greater, we would round up. Or if it's below halfway, we're going to round down, which it is in this case. So in other words, we're going to assume that we owned it on July 1st. Now watch what I do here. This is annual. Well, how many months did I own it for then? I owned it all of July, all of August, September, October, November, and December. So I owned it for 6 months. 800 represents 12 months. I want depreciation for 6 months, which is half of 12. In other words, my depreciation for this first year, I call it a stub year because we haven't owned it the full year, is $400. Accumulated depreciation represents the amount of depreciation that we have accumulated so far. How much has this thing been recorded as wearing out in our books to date? And so far it's $400 because we just bought the thing. So 400. My ending book value is always going to be this formula. Cost minus accumulated depreciation. And in this problem, my cost is the $2,000. I showed you how we got that. The accumulated depreciation after year 1 is 400. So if I take 2,000 minus 400, I get an ending book value of 1,600. Now watch what we do with this. We're going to take this 1,600 and bring it all the way down here, because now at the end of the next year, or the beginning of the next year, the amount I have not depreciated is the beginning book year value, beginning of year book value, which is the ending book value of the previous year. So that 1,600 carries through. I'm just going to put 1231 of 11 now. A whole year has passed. That's year number 2. I'm going to multiply it by the 40%, and you come up with $640 for that second year depreciation. The accumulated depreciation now is what we had accumulated in depreciation in total, which is the 400 from the previous year, plus now this 640, or $1,040 in total. Ending book value is the cost, 2,000, minus the accumulated depreciation, for a total of 960, and that gets carried through down to here. I'm just going to represent this as 2012. Still going to multiply by 40%. You carry that over, it's $384. Now the accumulated depreciation is this amount plus the 384, which gives us 1424. And my ending book value again is the cost, the 2,000, subtract the 1424, and you get 576. Carry that down, 576, and this starts to get pretty repetitive at this point. So we're doing the same thing, and so I'm just going to quickly go through the rest of these calculations, and you can run them and check my math. Accumulated depreciation is that plus that. We're at 1654.40, and my ending book value 345.60. Next year is going to be year 5 at 2014. This 345.60 carries its way down. Multiply by the 40%, you get 138.24. I'm going to add those two together. I come up with 1792.64. My ending book value is 207.36. Now at this point we said that the useful life of the cows is 5 years. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You might think, well, I'm done now at this point, but we're not, because this first year was a stub year, is a partial year. And so we have to depreciate this thing for an entire 5 years. So then, this 6th year will be the other half of the year number 1, and we'll make actually the date would now be at the end of June, not December 15. And here's where the declining balance is way different from the straight line method. It's actually easier at this point. If you went through and went through the logic we went through up here, you would come through with an incorrect answer, because we cannot depreciate this item past its salvage value. And that wasn't taken into account at all in our calculations until this very last year. And so that's why I've highlighted here, we're not going to depreciate past the salvage value. What's the salvage value? If we go back to our problem, look at this. I said right here, the salvage value is $100 for each cow. 2 cows makes $200. So I'm not going to go past $200. And if you went through the math, you wouldn't end up with that, which would be incorrect. So it's easy in the sense that all we're doing is plugging this in here and finding out the difference between the 207.36 and the 200, and guess what? That's the amount of the depreciation in that final year, which makes our answer correct.